My name's Marie McLeod and I'm a Senior Training Associate with Hawker Brownlow Professional Learning Solutions. I deliver the work of Dr. Ruby Payne, a framework for understanding poverty for schools, bridges out of poverty for the social service sector, and getting ahead. Framework is for schools and education. Ruby Payne's background is in education, so that's how the work started. It started from her observing differences when she was working in schools where children were from disadvantaged backgrounds right through to some very wealthy schools. And she observed a number of patterns and differences that she started to research and wrote her first book, A Framework for Understanding Poverty, on which this training is based. So in this training, firstly, we define what poverty is. So, and in this work and in this training, we define poverty more broadly. And we say that poverty is more than just about money. It's about access to resources. And Ruby names 9 resources that all people need to do well. And they include such things as your emotional resources, which are internal resources, your physical resources, your access to language and vocabulary, your access to role models that help you to do well. All of those things constitute what everyone needs to be able to do well. And what she puts forward is that when children are experiencing poverty, and particularly generational poverty, over time those resources are eroded. So we talk about the difference between generational poverty and situational poverty. Situational poverty being when something happens in a family that throws them into poverty, and the access to resources in those two different scenarios is very different. And then we talk about the impact that has on behaviours and mindsets for students and for families. We talk quite a bit about language and the language differences that occur in different classes and the different access to vocabulary and the different style of language. We talk about a concept called hidden rules, which Ruby has come up with, and what she says is that when you grow up in middle class, you inherently understand a set of hidden rules about how to behave in certain situations, and that helps you to be more successful. So we look at all of those things and we relate it to what you can do in the classroom and in the school setting to better respond to children and families that come from those backgrounds. There are 10 actions that we cover. There is a day 1 and there is a day 2, and as we get into day 2 we look more and more at the tools that you can use in your classroom and in your school. So we cover off those things, and really by the end of the day participants in the training will have access to at least 10 tools that they can go away and use. So Bridges Out of Poverty is for schools and communities that want to take a whole of community approach to addressing poverty. We cover much of the same concepts that we do in Bridges, but we look at it from the perspective of those concepts being applied at the individual, the organisational and the community level. So in Bridges we are really taking a holistic perspective. We do deliver training quite often to organisations who want all of their staff trained, and in those sessions we are often talking about tools that individual workers can use with their clients who come from poverty, but we also want the organisation as a whole to think about how it is operating and whether or not the way that the organisation is operating is based fundamentally on what works best for the organisation and the workers, or whether it's actually operating from a perspective of understanding what clients and people from poverty really need, and whether they have a mechanism to hear from those clients about what services they want to be delivered and how they want to be delivered. So it is focused around social service professionals. There's what we call the triple lens, which is individual, organisational and community level. So we go through all of those in a day 1, and then in a day 2 we start to target our interventions and talk about what that could look like in your organisation or in your community. The absolute pinnacle for us is when we get a whole community that say they want to become a Bridges community and they want to collectively across the board implement these the concepts in Bridges Out of Poverty. For us, we've done that we've worked with communities Benalla and Morwell in Victoria. usually that happens by one entity leading the way first and funding the initiative until the wave and the groundswell of support for this initiative sort of kicks in. When we take a whole of community approach, what we do is we deliver framework for understanding poverty for schools, bridges for social service professionals, and we also deliver Getting Ahead, which I'll talk about in a minute. And in this way, we start to have a shared understanding amongst all of the professionals supporting people and families in poverty. We also have a steering committee when we take that kind of approach, and the steering committee, the main role there is for them to support the implementation of a plan to address poverty in that location, but also to make sure that people from all socioeconomic classes are being heard in the change that's being proposed. So that is our absolute best case scenario, is when we get the opportunity to work with whole communities like that, and it's been wonderful to see both in Morwell and Benalla how that's happening. So Bridges Out of Poverty is also sometimes used in schools that want to take a community approach, but it originates from Phil DeVol's work, and he wrote it for social service professionals. So Getting Ahead is the piece of this work that is for people who are experiencing poverty. So the other two training pieces, Framework and Bridges, are for professionals. Getting Ahead is for people who have themselves been experiencing poverty. So the training that we offer is for local people to be trained to be able to facilitate Getting Ahead in their organisation or in their community. So the training is over 2 days. Getting Ahead runs twice a week for 10 weeks based on a workbook. It's written by Phil DeVol, and a precondition for Getting Ahead running in a community is that Bridges Out of Poverty has been run first with the professionals. And the reason for that is that when people are going through Getting Ahead, they're going to need a lot of support for change. And we've found the best ingredients for success in that instance is that they can be supported by agencies who have also been through this training, who also have the same language and are understanding the process that they're going through. So Bridges Out of Poverty happens first, and then we do Getting Ahead facilitator training, and then Getting Ahead runs. So this is reasonably new for us to be doing this, but has been really successful, and there's a real appetite for Getting Ahead across a number of disciplines. So DHS, Department of Human Services in Victoria, last year funded 7 pilots of Getting Ahead, and their focus was on long-term unemployed people. So in most instances, that was run perhaps alongside a certificate in vocational preparation. Different organisations have run it differently depending on what their local circumstances are. But it's looking to be very successful, and some places who have run it have already decided that they will continue to run it, and they've embedded it into their organisation or the community. So Northern Futures, which is an employment organisation based down in Nor Lane near Geelong, they now run it always, because they've found that people who do Getting Ahead then succeed better when they go on to other vocational training. And in Benalla, they're continuing to run it. Maryborough, they're continuing to run it. So it's seen really great success. Perhaps I'll talk about Maryborough as an example where in last year, 2012, Maryborough won the inaugural Joan Kerner Social Justice Award for this program, Getting Ahead. They had 16 people that went through Getting Ahead, and 10 months after the program had finished, 15 of those people were in accredited training or in work. So it was a great success rate for people that came from very, very disadvantaged backgrounds. So it seems to be filling a gap. The great thing about Getting Ahead and the point of difference is that it's really led by the participants. So you do have one or two facilitators in the room, but the very strong philosophy behind Getting Ahead is that it is led by the participants, that the participants get presented with the material, and much of that is similar material that's presented to professionals in Framework or Bridges, but in this instance, people are experiencing that on a very personal level, and it culminates in them making their own plan for change, and then calling out who will support them in that journey. And that may be agencies who have also been trained. It may be that they also realise there's some people that they need to leave behind on this journey from poverty to prosperity. So Getting Ahead's really exciting for us. It's looking to be very successful, and another piece in the puzzle that was previously missing. This training is about creating an understanding for people about what it's really like for people who have experienced poverty. It's about developing that understanding, but it's also about change. And my observation is that what occurs when people attend this training is that they really have to look at themselves and their own attitudes and beliefs. The training challenges people to think about the way they think and the way they practice. My observations of the feedback that we get is what really makes me passionate about continuing the work. People tell me that listening to this training and feeling it and going through it really creates a change for them when they go back to their organisations and when they're working with their clients. And for me, that's what keeps me going and keeps me going to all the wonderful places and meeting all the wonderful people and continuing to deliver this training. It seems that this kind of training creates a shift, and that the impact of that continues long after I've gone. So it seems to inspire people to change, and that's what I love about it.